the next tool that we're looking at is the blur tool. Now the blur tool can be used to, as it says, blur out a particular part of the image. You can see the sort of difference that's coming up. I'm able to draw on an area and decrease the detailing of that image, of that area. Now the blur power that has been selected over here right now, you can see from the options bar, is at 50%. Again, increases to 100%, and of course the blurring is going to be way more higher. Now this tool is particularly useful when trying to create bokeh shots, or if I would want to increase the blurriness of the elements in the background. This is also sometimes used to simplify or to reduce the amount of blemishes or the spots on a screen when you are working with close-up portraits. Another tool that's over here is the opposite of blur tool, which is sharpen tool. Now with that sharpen tool, so when I draw on this, you can see how the certain parts of that part of the image have now increased in the detailing. That's by increasing the amount of brightness and the contrast from those particular sections. Let's undo all of this and go back over here, and let's select the next tool. Next tool is smudge. Very similar to how you smudge with a pencil drawing on paper. That's very similar effect that happens over here. When I click and drag with that, it smudges the entire area and moves on with 1 pixel from 1 pixel area and blends it to a certain extent with the other pixels over there. The next set of tools is dodge, burn, and sponge tool. We'll get into this in more detail when we are actually going through photography part of the course. The next tool that we are going to be looking at is the pen tool. Now this is especially useful when you're trying to create very detailed arcs. There is going to be a small explainer course on setting up and how to use these pens to create whether shapes or whether it's going to be used to create different parts or mask. That's something that we'll see in way more detail. But this is basically the pen tool, and there are a couple of other options that are used with the pen tool, which is freeform, curvatures, adding an anchor or removing an anchor point, or converting an anchor point from one style to another. Now we'll get back to this in a specific video. Moving on to the next tool, which is the text tool. Now this basically allows me to set text on the screen. When I click on the layer somewhere over here or wherever in the image, it allows me to create a new text. And with this text, I can go back to properties. I can select this text and I can change the formatting of the text as in what is needed. But this is the text tool or the type tool. And there are a couple of other variations for the text tool as well. I can create a horizontal type, which is typing from left to right. It could also be vertical type, which is from top to bottom. It can also create mask using text that we'll also see, and we'll use it in one of the future lessons. The next tool is the path selection tool. Now this is particularly useful when you're working with paths, specifically the one that we created just with pen a while back. I can click and select on paths. I can also select certain pixel or the certain parts of that path, and I can play around with that. Now this is also possible using the pen tool, and very similar to how this works in Illustrator. If you've probably used Illustrator, you probably work with paths a lot over there, and that's what has been replicated over here in Photoshop as well. Now that's for the path tool or the direct selection tool. The next tool that we are looking at is creating a shape layer. Now the shape layer can be used with a rectangle, ellipse, triangle, polygon, or lines, or you can also have a custom shape. Now each of these tools allows you to create the shape that has been specifically mentioned. There are a couple of options over here in the options bar, which says I can fill a particular shape with a given color that I want. I can also select the certain set of colors from here. There is something for the stroke, and there are dimensions that I can define before I create that shape layer as well. So this was the rectangle tool. Very similarly, there is the ellipse tool with which I can create circles or ellipses. If I press shift, I'll be able to constrain it to a 1:1 ratio. That means it will end up creating a circle. And with these options, it also can create a path, or I can set certain pixels directly without creating any shape that is new layer. So you have seen the rectangle and the ellipse tool, and very similarly, the triangle, polygon, line, and custom shapes also work. With custom shape, I can select a particular shape that has been defined over here. Let's say something for flowers. Now these are all the predefined shapes that I have received from Photoshop. I can create that shape right over here. Of course, I can squish or stretch this layer, this shape where I'm creating it. Let me hold shift for now to make it into a constraint 1:1 sort of format, so that I can see this layer that has been created. Now, as I said, there are multiple shapes that are already provided by Photoshop, and we'll explore how I can add more shapes over here. Let me delete all of these before we move on. Right. And lastly, the hand tool. Hand tool allows me to drag the image from one place to the other. When I've zoomed in very specifically, it is basically the replacement for scrolling in the image from left and right. I will be able to move diagonally, vertically, and horizontally, all using this at the same time. There's something for the zoom. I can zoom in and zoom out of these images. The options over here allow me to, when it says plus, it allows me to zoom in. And if it says minus, it allows me to zoom out. I can also click and drag and zoom in and out of the image as needed. There are a couple of other options over here. The resize windows to fit. I can click on fit screen, fill screen. I can also set a certain percentage. If I click on 100%, it basically shows the entire pixel at 100% of the ratio. And that's something about all the tools that we have seen. We have seen all the toolbars over here. There are a few tools that we'll explore in detail in the upcoming videos. But more or less, you have understood the kind of tools that are here in Photoshop and how to select certain tools and how to use certain tools for specific purposes. Let's get into the specific needs from here going forward.